Hey everybody, this is Mad Matt Carter. Thank you so much for watching the AIWF Network YouTube channel as well as the AIWF Ringside Wrestling channel. If you like what you see, please do us a big favor. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that bell to get notifications every time we post new videos on both our channels. It means a lot to us, and thanks a lot for watching once again.
Welcome, everybody, to Pro Wrestling Wire Radio here on ProWrestlingWire.com, YouTube, WON Sports, and, of course, the AIWF Network. I've got a very special guest here with me today, Mr. Josef von Schmidt. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much for doing this today. I've been very much looking forward to this. So, yeah, man, everything's great over here. So we're going to talk a little bit about your wrestling career over the next hour or so. So tell me, how did you get interested in this wonderful sport of professional wrestling? It's a very special sport, wouldn't you agree?
Very special. It gets more special the more I see it unfolding as the years go on. For me, I knew when I was a little kid, a lot of people are just like, oh, what are you going to be when you grow up? And Bobby's going to be a firefighter, Billy's going to be a cop, and Susie's going to be a ballerina. But Peter here, he was going to be a pro wrestler, and I knew it from an early age.
Yeah. Okay. What was some of your favorite stuff growing up? Now, did you grow up in Connecticut? I know.
Yeah, I grew up in Connecticut, in Milford. And that's where we went to the New Haven Coliseum a lot. That's where we saw the WWF. And that's where we saw like Andre the Giant, Sergeant Slaughter, Hulk Hogan. I remember going to 7-Eleven in Milford and Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov there handing out Slurpees. That was like my era of like being with WWE and being around those types of wrestlers. They were still just hustling and bustling.
Yeah. New Haven Coliseum was also the home of my very first event as well. What year was yours? I always like to talk about this. I'm sorry. It was the show that made me obsessed. I was a fan prior, but my first live show, which was like 5 years after I became a fan, made me get obsessed with the sport of
I don't
wrestling.
remember the exact date. There's a couple different times. There's two things that I remember. I remember going to the New Haven Coliseum to pick up my older brother who had gone and seen his show, and he was in the middle of being mugged. They were trying to steal his wrestling magazine, and then me and my dad pulled up, and they kind of like 86'd, and we picked up my brother. But the time that I remember most about the New Haven Coliseum is when I was a little kid. I was in the crowd, and Sergeant Slaughter, he was doing this thing where he would go out after the show and he would pick up kids and put them on his shoulder. And growing up watching G.I. Joe, that was the moment that really got me more than wanting to be a wrestler, but started my obsession to find out how to become a wrestler. Right. But I don't have a date.
No. Mine was the April 1988 TV tapings for Superstars. I'd been watching for a number of years, and I think it was a bunch of kids were going to school, and then I said, I got to go to this, and then my dad got tickets. We were literally in the last row of the Coliseum. You know how high up that was?
Yeah.
And it was shortly after Savage won the title, and it was Savage and Andre in a rematch in the main event. Which Savage lost by disqualification for using a chair. That is like the first live memory of a live show that I have with me. So,
yeah. Let's
see. So you started. You trained under Jason Knight. Is this correct?
That's where I started. Very interesting story. I started collegiate wrestling when I was 12. Didn't know how to get into professional. wrestling. And then I got wind of Killer Kowalski's school up in Massachusetts. And I finally, like, after we all have those moments of, oh, should I, shouldn't I? Is this going to be right for me? The day before I made the decision to go to Kowalski School and check it out, I saw on uh, public access, Jason Knight was on a TV show there, and he was promoting his school in Waterbury. And so, I became a fan of ECW at that point. I really enjoyed their product. It was different. It was edgy. And so he was maybe 45 minutes from where I grew up. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to need to go check this school out first. And I went and checked that school out, and that's where I started my training.
Was the training any as hard as you thought it was going to be?
Some aspects of it. I think the tough thing about when you go to a wrestling school, and this kind of gauged me for my future, and we'll get to there about my wrestling academy. But you go into a place, you see someone that you know from TV, and you figure they're going to be the ones training you. That's really not normally the case. And so, he was there. He kind of trained me here and there, but he had like people like Ron Zombie and Dylan Cage, and then Rick and Black Ice, Iceberg and Black Ice. They were like Cold Front. I wonder if you remember them. They were like the tag team champions. Yep. And those kind of vested interest in me, and they were kind of trained me. And he would bring in like, Balls Mahoney and Stevie Richards and Justin Credible, and those guys would kind of, Kid Cash, they would kind of come in and do seminars. Joel Gertner, I remember, came in, and I think Scott Hall showed up one time, but he never came into the building. He stayed in the car. Really interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I remember. I think I remember when Cash was in the area doing a seminar, and I think he worked a bunch of events for him, didn't he? For Jason at the time.
Yeah,
when he was running ACW. Yeah.
He was doing some shows. I think one of the major things that he brought Kid Cash in for was to wrestle Dylan Cage and kind of build Dylan up, for his, cruiserweight or to carry the company's title in that division. Forgive me, I didn't really pay too much attention to that storyline, but I believe that's kind of what he brought Kid Cash in for.
Right. So I have a question. I'm going to probably name some people that you worked, and one of them, the earliest match that I could find, and during my research, was against a very good friend of mine, Mr. I guess I'll call him by his name, Bull Dread. How is that? What do you think about working with Dread? Now, he said that you guys had the opportunity to team up for a while as well, and tag team partners, and then you worked each other quite a bit.
Yeah, we did. We kind of came in like going back to me starting at ACW. I started, and then I believe within 2 weeks, Dread came in and had his first class. So I'm 2 weeks ahead of him. I'm definitely his veteran, and so whenever he asks you, you just make sure you let him know that, I'm the vet. He's the greenhorn. But yeah, no, we had a lot of fun. Dread is definitely one of my friends. There's not many close friends you really have in wrestling, right? And that's one shady thing about the business. Even friends that you think are close at some point, eventually opportunity takes way of friendship. That never happened with me and Dread. Me and Dread really enjoyed each other. We traveled around. We did New York, LIWF Doghouse. We tagged as the Dreaded Guns. And then we also had, later on, we had plenty of matches where it was just me versus him. And I think that was one of our first major feuds at ACW as a singles person for me, was against Dread.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bring up a name. Now, this name, I'm going through research. Tim Kilgore. is a very name that I have not heard in a very long time. And then I was doing research and I came across it. I was like, holy crap, I got to ask you about working with that guy.
So Tim Kilgore, funny that you brought that up because I was thinking of the first time where I broke away from ACW and started PWA, and Tim Kilgore was one of the guys that we brought in. And I really liked him. Very generic character, but I did like his personality, and he was good in the ring. And I just thought to myself the other day, and it's hilarious that you bring this up. And this is not pre-stage whatsoever. And I had no idea he was going to bring Tim Kilgore up, but I was like, the opportunity that Tim had to work for PWA or anywhere, like he really was a good worker, but he just really had no like character, or he really didn't have a
personality.
Like,
yeah,
I'm a German, and Old Red is hardcore, and like everybody has like these personas, and Tim Kilgore was Tim Kilgore, So.
Yeah. Well, that's the difference. I think that there's a lot of wrestlers, I think, that have the shit ton of potential out there, especially a lot of the young guys that I see working here in Connecticut, but then the only thing that's keeping them behind is like, man, this guy's really good, but he has no personality whatsoever. And it's keeping the connection away from the fans in a way. They're not connecting with the fans because there's no personality there. They're just going out there and having a match, basically.
Right. And that's the thing. That's kind of like where I was in the limbo as well as Pat Gunner before I made the transition to Josef von Schmidt. Two guys were very integral on that transition for me. One, Sabu. I know he's in the doghouse with a lot of people now, but the one thing I won't forget is I was with him on a show in New York, and he was like, and he didn't know me from, hole in the wall, but he's talking to me, and he was like, I want to tell you a story. Before I was Sabu, I was Terry Bunk. And he was like, I worked about 8 years, didn't make a nickel. And then all of a sudden, my uncle's like, you're the Sheik. You point at the sky. And, he goes, within the next 6 months, I made more money than the first 8 years of my wrestling career. And that at that point, when he told me that, I was about 8 years into my wrestling career, and I was Pat Gunner, a name that Jason came up with. And like, I really couldn't get behind it. I didn't understand the character. I didn't understand the name. I tried my best to make it work, but like, I didn't really have direction. And then the following week, I actually ran into Justin Credible had brought me up to a show in Massachusetts. I think it was Big Time Wrestling. And I saw John Cena Sr., and he started talking to me, and he was like, he's like, you're a big guy. He's like, what's your character? And I was like, I'm Pat Gunner. I'm a big guy. I mess people up. And he was like, so you're 98% of the big guys on the indies. Is that what you're telling me? And I was like, yep, that's what it sounds like. And he was like, you need a character. That's what you're missing. He goes, once you get a character, he goes, I guarantee you within 6 months, you're going to be on your first tour out of the country. And so, I'm like, Sabu tells me one thing one week. I'm riding with Justin Credible, and then Cena Sr. is telling me another thing. These guys know wrestling, and who am I to think I know better? So I'm like, you know what? Yeah, let's try to figure out a character. He's like, how about the new George the Animal Steel? And I was like, I don't think I can get behind that. And he was like, well, what else do you do? And I was like, well, I'm German. I go, my parents are German. I'm first generation, born here in the U.S. And he was like, German. Is that right? He's like, how's your German accent? Let's hear it. And then I was like, and then I started working. And then I really started just imitating my mother. And that's where Josef von Schmidt actually was born. It was like a play on my mother.
Very interesting. May I go backwards just a tiny bit? I want to, and then we'll go, forward. I have a memory of a show in which you were involved in, and I've been trying to remember this exactly. I remember I was there with a friend. Balls Mahoney was in the match. I think it was Meriden, Connecticut, maybe. Did it? And you guys were in the main event. Did the show get shut down because it was just a wild brawl? If I remember correctly, did some fans get involved? If I remember, does this sound familiar at all to you?
There was a couple.
I think a fan.
There was a couple wild shows. Like we had some we had some rowdy because it was coming off of ECW and ECW,
Right.
and so there were a lot of different incidents. Not necessarily with me. I don't think I was in that main event.
You might have been. You might have been on the show. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. You might have been on the show. I'm sorry. Now that I take that part back, but it might have been Ron in balls maybe in the match. I just remember all of a sudden somebody was maybe heckling and said the wrong thing to balls. Next thing you know, the whole show, the main event got shut down. They shut down the whole show. So I was like, holy crap. So this is going back probably 2005, 2006 or so.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I mean, me and Balls wrestled, I think, one time at ACW, but we wrestled a four-way in Waterbury, so I wasn't that show. But there was always times where fans would, because there was always drinking and stuff. I remember that club, and that place was wild, and so there was a lot of incidents, and I believe one or two of the shows did get called because of just like rowdiness, and like maybe like one of them was like a club member, and he came to the show and just thought he was a wrestler because he saw it on TV or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there was always kind of stuff like that, and then they would I guess they would try to test the boys, and they would find out, and for lack of a better term, they would find out that it's not a joke. Anyways, let's go back to your progression into Josef von Schmidt. So basically, seen a senior, and you had a whole conversation, and you basically said it was basically a play on your mother, the accent and such, and you were going forward. So how did I'm sorry.
My mother was a character, like God rest her. She just passed away maybe last year, April, or sorry, May, right before Mother's Day. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
I appreciate it. She's a good lady. She's in heaven, so we'll see her again soon. But yeah, she just always had like the one-liners and zingers. She was the type of person that was absolutely hilarious, but didn't even realize it. And she was super rude because most Germans are rude. And so one of her famous lines was like, whenever any kind of kid was in trouble, she would never blame a kid. She said, "Your mother should be arrested." And that was one of my favorite lines that I've ever always used in my wrestling career as Josef von Schmidt is, you don't blame the child, you blame the parent. And so it was one that always had me laughing. And every time I just get to the point where a kid's yelling at me, I said, "Your mother should be arrested," because they didn't teach him.
Yeah, they got to teach them respect, right? Not to talk to adults. So. It's true though. It's a true line. Anyways, let's see your progression. How did that progress in as the character Josef von Schmidt, and what was the initial reaction over when you started to change that into that?
Well, which way? There's two reactions, right? The boys in the back, and then the fans. Like, which progression do you want to hear first? Because they're completely bipolar.
Yeah, actually, why don't we do both? But you could, go with one first and then go with the other the second. Because I'm actually more interested in how is it the fans? Were the fans very like that familiar with you as Gunner, and then you just suddenly changed the character, correct?
Some were, but what happened was I took some time off, and came back as Josef von Schmidt because I had a back injury. I was in a car accident and I hurt my back, and I was told I was never going to wrestle again. But I took about a year off, and then when I came back as Josef von Schmidt, and so the remembrance of me kind of had faded, and then I just Josef von Schmidt's on the scene, right. But a lot of the boys from ACW were just like, "Oh, you're crazy! Like people know you as Pat Gunner, and you're throwing that away, and you're going to be Josef von Schmidt." Like, no one's gonna buy it. It's gonna be awful, and you're crazy. Like, that's what I heard constantly from a ton of people. But in the back of my head, it's like John Cena, Sabu. They're telling me these things, and Bulldog Belansky and Billy John, and these other guys are just like telling me I'm not going to succeed, and I'm like, well, John Cena, Sabu telling me I am, you guys telling me I'm not. Gonna go ahead and push through and listen to, you know, these guys and create a character and just like really push the limits of it. And the genius of the character was like everybody wanted to be over at that point. You know, everyone wanted to be the baby face and over. And I'm like, you know what? I want to wrestle Sergeant Slaughter. How's the best way that I'm going to do this? I got to be a villain and I got to want to lose. And that's really how Josef von Schmidt, like I would go into any promotion. The first thing that they would do is they would have me job out. And like I did it so well within, you know, 3 or 4 shows, I was their champion. And like, cause they just like, they understood like what I was doing with the character.
Hey, Paul, I'm hungry. You forgot to pack a lunch.
That's all right, son. I stopped off at King's Hot Dogs. We got us some King dogs.
You're the best, Pa.
Good hot dog. This is the life, son.
It sure is, Pa.
So you got to travel pretty much, kind of throughout the pretty much a good portion of the United States. Did you into Canada as well? Did you travel internationally as well, like further out there, or
Yeah,
did you not get
I
to?
won a title in Ecuador. I won titles in Mexico. I won a title in England. I won titles in Canada, and then I won. You know, I'm at 57 championships in 5 countries right now, and I just won
Holy
my
crap!
7th championship a couple weeks ago at Stranglehold Championship Wrestling here in Georgia. And I'm actually going to be wrestling for my 58th title in August for Hope Championship Wrestling. So my goal is to hit about 60 titles before I retire. But, you know, we all have goals.
Yeah, I see. This one might seem a little random, but you work for NWA on Fire. You worked Jason Rumble. Jason Rumble appeared on the podcast about 4 years ago. He was a nice guy. He's got a lot of great stories. Or you teamed against him. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Or with him. What was it like working with the Savoldis? You know, with them owning the NWA on Fire at the time.
Dude, I loved it. I was the NWA heavyweight champion. One of my favorite matches was against Brian Fury and Apollo in a cage match with Nunzio as the referee. That's how I won the championship. And it's still one of my favorite posters of all time. It's like Brian Fury, 6-time NWA champion, Apollo, 9-time or 6-time NWA champion, Josef von Schmidt, 19-time international champion, and it's like the cage and Nunzio. And so like that was one of the times I finally like looked when I saw a poster and I was like, man, I really accomplished a lot. And I never even thought about it up until that point, until I saw that poster for the Savoldis. And they were really, really kind to me. They were really good to me. They really enjoyed the character. They pushed me as much as they could and as much as I wanted to be pushed. And I'll never forget that type of love and respect that the Savoldis had for me. And they would have like, you know, Tony do the job for me. And like, you know, Tony was like, I don't do the job for anybody, but the Savoldis, like, they're like, you're gonna do it for him. And
Mario's still very good friends with Tony. I had Mario on the show last year. Finally, that's you know, that was like me, you know, that was just an incredible feat for me, I guess, to get somebody like Mario Savoldi on the show, because I've been a fan of the Savoldi as I was a little kid, all their different companies that they've owned over the years. But sorry about that, cut you off again. Yeah.
You didn't cut me off, man, because we all share good stories about the Savoldi's, and that's a good thing to have. A lot of people, different memories and fantastic stories with them, and I'm just happy that, I think by the time they were finished, I was their last heavyweight champion. Like anyone else had captured the champion for NWA on Fire since me. And so that was, again, an honor for me to have for the Savoldi's. Like, I always enjoyed working for old school promoters because they really understood, like, who I was and my character, and that I was really just about business and doing what's right to grow the wrestling promotion that I worked for. I wasn't in it for myself, and I'm still not in it for myself.
So when did you decide to start the PWA?
So PWA came about, like I said, I had an injury. I had a back injury from a car accident. And, I was already told at that point that I was never going to wrestle again. And then I had a falling out with Jason Knight, my original trainer. Some things had happened, and, not to get too tangled in it, but, he said this, it got back to me. I came back and said that, and and we just haven't seen eye to eye since. Not that we're looking to fist fight each other, but so with that falling out, I was like, you know what? I only have a certain amount of time before I can never possibly wrestle again, and so I'm gonna go for it. And this guy came up to me, this guy named John Bolton, not to be confused with the '80s singer, but John Bolton came up to me and he was like, hey, I'm going to be starting this company and I want you to be the booker. And, what do you think? And I was like, whatever. Didn't really think much of it. I was like, whatever you want to do. I was like, but there's one thing that I got to ask you. I go, because I don't like the power seat of booking. Like, I'll do it. But I was like, you have to book my matches. I was like, I'm not going to book myself in these matches for your company. And I was like, I'll be truthful. I'll tell you what's going to work and what's not going to work and what I think. And believe me, he came up to me with some doozy of matches, and I had to tell him straight out, no, it was a very bad idea. But he agreed. And then, so he booked my matches. Like, I'm going to put you against Raven. I'm going to do this with you. I'm going to get, we're going to have balls and Sabu and ECW too, I'm like, okay. And then he started delivering. And so that I was able to start like scouting talent. And a big thing about PWA, what I'm a huge fan of right now is like, I don't care. I like scope and talent. I don't care where they're from. If I can get them to come to a place where they're not normally seen, within reason, like I will try to book them, and I will figure out a way to pay them to get them to perform, because I understand how good they are. And maybe the fans don't yet or haven't seen them yet, but I know when I see good talent, and I'll do pretty much anything I can to get them that good talent in the building and work shows.
So you were basically did you own it? You owned it, right? Correct? Or
So
you were one of the owners?
I was technically at first, no. John owned
Okay.
PWA, and I was the booker. But as things started to go south, like he did not like my truthfulness with him, and like that started to jade our positions, right? And so
Gotcha.
we went from friends and bookers to being at odds, because I wouldn't just yes him on everything. Like, he came up with this match and he was like, we're going to do an acorn in a garbage can match, and like, two guys are going to have an acorn and they're going to wrestle over an acorn, and then the winner puts it in the garbage can. And I was like, that's absolutely terrible, and no, that's not going to be something we do. And that was kind of like the progression of he left. And then so as he was leaving, he actually had overspent his budget and he couldn't come up with money. And so he came to me and he was like, listen, I can't pay these guys. I think he owed like, $1,200 at one of the last shows that we did. And I was like, listen, I'll come out of pocket. I'll pay these wrestlers the $1,200. I was like, but I want the rights and I want the name for the Pro Wrestling Academy. And or it was Pro Wrestling Alliance at the time, and then we turned it to Pro Wrestling Academy. And he was like, okay, deal. He's like, it's yours if you just pay these guys. And then I came up with the money, paid the wrestlers, and then I had the rights to the promotions. I still have all the video footage of all the shows.
Was that, what year was that about? Was that 2016 or was that before that?
No, that was 2004 to 2000.
2004, that far back? Okay. Okay. So who were some of your earliest students there as training? I know some of the guys that you've had to work with that are still around today, I know, but when it became a school, did it become a school right away? I'm sorry, did I ask that already?
No, it didn't become a school right away because what it was a promotion, and then I put it on the back burner because of like I said, after this happened, I got all the rights to it, and then I was injured, so I took about a year or so,
Right.
year and a half, and then I came back, and then I really focused on the transition of Josef on Schmidt, and really getting my name out there and traveling all over and starting this thing, and then. Now what you're talking about is 2016 is when the opportunity opened for me to have another promotion, which this time I wanted to make it an academy. And so that's Haven. There was do you know much about that era?
No, actually, there's a when you guys were in existence, that's around that time period. I was actually divorcing my first wife, so I kind of pulled back a lot from being out and going to things like wrestling and stuff like that. I kind of, went through a whole thing myself, and then I guess when I got back involved in like 2018 or whatever, that's when I met Roma and stuff like that. Started hanging out at PAPW and stuff like that, and going forward, and now brings us to today. So there's a whole probably 5 or so years chunk of years that I missed. So
okay, so basically what had happened was I put it out there, like I was coming back off of tours and stuff, and I'm like, I want to open a wrestling academy. I have this itch again to kind of like do a promotion. Mario Mancini contacts me, or we get in contact somehow. I don't remember how that was, but he was like, hey, I got this kid that I train over in New Haven, Vin the Chin, and I'm really not wanting to train him anymore, and he's got his facility, and he might be willing to do something with you, or maybe you can work with him. And so I went down there. I met this kid, Vin the Chin. Nice guy, but just really difficult to work with. I understand why Mario kind of like pulled away from him, but I could work with anybody. I'm going to tell you how it is. Like, you're going to like me, you're not going to like me. And if you don't like me, guess what? I'm still going to do what I do. And I don't really put much weight into it. And so we started working together. We made some deals. And then I quickly began to believe that I was doing the majority of the work, and he was not doing any of the work. And so, as we started progressing, that's where, things started to get a little bit odd there. And then I finally spun off and did my own thing in Cheshire, Connecticut. But we had like TKO. We had a bunch of kids that came in. I think this kid Drew was one of the kids that was originally Jason's student, and then he left his school because he didn't like it. And then a couple of years later, he came back and he was like, if you ever open a school, I'm going to be your first student. And he was. And then, we had, like Nocturne and Buzz Bloodsaw, like in Gursky, and like these guys all came out of there. And then there was just tons of other people. Like, there's so many people that came through my school. Like, I hate to say that I don't remember them all, but I don't. Not because that they weren't good or anything like that, but like I've had so many students that I've trained and worked with. Like when I watch videos, I'm like, oh, who's that guy? You know what I mean? And so it's really interesting that what that really turned into. And like as we were progressing there, it was an academy. We started running shows, and like it was a really small place, and we started getting like 60, 70 people coming in, and it was honestly it would seat 30, right? And so we got 75 people in there, and 80 and 90, and then all of a sudden people are calling the fire marshal, and the fire marshal's there, and they're like, you can't be running these type of shows here. There's like max you can have 30 people in here, and there's like 25 people standing outside trying to look through the door. And so that's how kind of like it reminded me that I had a good eye for understanding how to book talent and how to put talent together. Like a lot of people, when they come into training facilities, like the trainer will look at them and say, either they'll make a decision right there. Do they have talent? Do they have everything that they need? Do they have the looks? Do they have the athletic ability? If so, I'm going to invest my time and I'm going to go ahead and train them properly. If not, I'm going to sit back here and do whatever I do. And then I'm going to have my other students train them. And so I always saw when any student came through my door, I always didn't just think Triple H was coming through the door, right? You see, short kids, fat kids, ugly kids, whatever they are, they're coming through the door. You got to figure out how to use their talent, how to use who they are, because realistically, any person can be a star in the wrestling business. You just have to know how to draw it out of them and how to make them use their aspects and talents to get to that level. People can disagree with me all they want, but a couple of years back, you can go ahead and turn on WWE. You see a fat guy with a bow tie and a Speedo dancing around spraying oil on himself. He used what he had, right?
I remember that guy. Chris something, right? He was from the area, I think, if I remember correctly. So I saw him at a bunch of shows. Anyways, I think I saw him at a Savoldi show, believe it or not. So I'm looking at the list of the names that you guys had here. It's like it's a really insanely great list. There's guys like Nutrius X, guys that I've had the opportunity to work with and call some of his matches as of late. Jekyll, as you said, Bloodsaw, he's going to come on the podcast in the future. So I mean, like I said, like these guys are fantastic performers. Troy Stevens, who was a very good, pretty good worker, I think, and there's a lot of great talent that you guys had run through your school.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you can go ahead and say whatever you want about, like you can say, was Peter Schmidt, Joseph von Schmidt, Pat Gunner, whatever, however you know me, was I a good trainer and did I understand the wrestling business? There's going to be people that say yes, and there's going to be people that say no. But if you look at the paperwork, look who's the current champions of the majority of the Connecticut promotions. I haven't been in the scene for 5.5 years. The majority of my students are the ones who are carrying a lot of these promotions, believe it or not. They're the champions, they're the title holders. And that's a quiet nod to me, and I do appreciate seeing that. But I'm very thankful for just the ability that God has given me to understand talent and how to craft them to be the best they can be.
My other question is, when you're teaching and then you have a new student come in, how often was it somebody like they don't get that they think the business is something completely different, that they think they're just going to walk into stardom, that they're going to learn something overnight, and that they're going to become stars overnight? Like, how often was that something that happened constantly? I have a thing that there's a certain couple of people that I think that just don't seem to get it, I've run into, that think that they think that they should have they've been in maybe 2-3 years, feel maybe that they should be already on TV. You know what I mean? It's like they're not out there pushing for 5, 10, if not more.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple different reasons on why they are like that. Number one, someone hasn't set the expectation for them properly, whether they just decided to tell them or they just want to collect their money or whatever it may be, but the reality is I've had people walk through my door and they believe that they're going to be stars. And I'm like, just let me sit down here with you for a minute. Let me just tell you something. You suck. You're not really good. You need a lot of training and you just really don't understand this business. And I've had that conversation with a lot of people, and a lot of people left, never paid me a dime, and that's fine. And there's others that really understood and they never heard it before. And they were like, wow, this guy's being truthful with me. And I'm like, you stink, but I can get you to the point where you become good. But you just have to listen. And, you can't just walk in here and believe you know it all. Like, what the hell's the point of you coming into my academy? If you believe you know it all and you're great, then what are you coming here to train for? Just go on the circuit. Like, go do your thing, be famous. Like, but the reality is like, you don't know what you're doing. Guys like me and guys like who came before me, I have 20 odd years of experience in working with people who are long gone. Ox Baker, Piper, Snuka, all these guys, Iron Sheik, like these people they poured knowledge into me. That's not, these kids don't have that knowledge anymore. They can't even get it. The only way they can get it is through someone like me or someone who has that experience. And, just setting the expectations and goal for what it really is. And that's what it is. The main thing is exactly that. No one has told them the reality of the wrestling business. They're just like, what, this kid's in here, he's paying money. Let's just go ahead and let him have a bad attitude as long as he's paying. That's unfortunately who you get now sometimes.
Secondhand Heroes and Home for Wayward Villains is a comic book shop and gaming store that also features Magic the Gathering and D&D. Located at 18184 Leesville Road in Evington, Virginia, Secondhand Heroes is your one-stop shop for you to get your nerd on. Open 7 days a week at 11 a.m., they don't close until the dice stop rolling. They buy, sell, trade, barter, and haggle, specializing in collectible toys, both vintage and modern, comics, Magic the Gathering, video games, console, and arcade cabinets to play, all set to free play. Host your game night with us. Monday night D&D video game competitions, and so much more. Something for the collector and gamer in us all. Call 434-317-0121 or shoot us an email with any questions to secondhandheroesva@gmail.com. Note, secondhandheroesva@gmail.com. That's 2ND, handheroesva@gmail.com. Come game with us.
So you brought up a name that I should probably ask you about that. From what I understand, was Ox Baker an integral part of helping train a PWA on occasion, or did he run? He was a very good friend of yours, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was a good friend. He was my mentor, and so he had a lot of knowledge. And by the time he came in, he taught a couple things. He taught a couple shoot holds and stuff to the students, and he taught etiquette and understanding the business and the art that was going away. And so he did come in, he did do seminars. They were limited, of course, because by that time he was not really wrestling around. He could
barely move, I think, right? He could barely move.
He could throw you in a hold and stuff like that, and then he could kind of school you about wrestling in the business and the things that he saw, the things that were do's and don'ts for him. And those are really important, is understanding the do's and don'ts, because a lot of guys don't understand that you can just walk into a locker room or a place and you say the wrong thing and you don't think you said the wrong thing and you're over. You're going to be doing these shows. Yeah, you're going to be doing all these one-off shows. You're going to be working in just one promotion, and maybe you'll be the champ of the promotion, but you're never going to travel the world. You're never going to go to the big time TV because you've already said something that's offended someone who is close to someone at the top. Right. And so
and respect is key. I think that when you walk through that door, you have to shake somebody's hand. There's plenty of times that that doesn't happen, and it rubs people the wrong way, and people will know about it basically.
Right. It's not a dead art. A lot of people think it's just, oh, the progression of wrestling and think times are changing and this. There's always an old school guy, and he's
Yeah,
gonna and that when the old school guys get behind you, guess what? You're going to the top. Look at Jordan Grace and Shawn Michaels. Like, she's
right,
not stupid. She's like, she understands who he is, and she's like, you know what? I'm gonna befriend this guy, and I'm gonna learn everything I can from him because he has knowledge and understanding on how to be the best, right?
right,
And um, that's kind of the thing. Like, these people don't understand. They're like, oh, I talked to so and so, and like, they never shook my hand. They never did that. But eventually, you get to the point where these people who are at the top, these are these veterans that are grizzled, and they still have that advocacy that they hold.
right. And they're teaching all the youngsters, I guess you could say, the new crop of students coming into the game.
I mean, if respect and this stuff wasn't really a big deal, why would WWE a couple of years back start doing all this homegrown stuff, and they didn't want anything to do with independence, right?
Right.
They all these guys coming in, and they just think that they don't have to have etiquette, they don't have to have any kind of understanding or respect. So what? WWE goes and says, you know what, we're gonna do Tough Enough, and we're gonna train these people up, and we're gonna bring them in, and we're gonna make our own talent and teach them right from the ground level. And that's why a lot of people miss their opportunities.
What do you think it is that when they bring crop of students into, say, the performance center, they have basically a list of athletes and then a list of wrestlers, and then I guess they separate the two, and they're more so about the athletes, from what I heard. I think I heard that in an interview from Jeff Cobb, if I remember correctly. He was on the wrestler list, and then he was, they were more so interested in the athletes and or I guess that weren't professional wrestlers.
Mm-hmm. Well, because remember, when you sort certain types of guys, depending on who you're trained by, I have my pros and cons too, because number one, I was trained in strong style, and then I was trained in lucha libre in Mexico. So
Okay.
if you're not looking for a strong style lucha libre wrestler, and you go to WWE, like they're like, he has these trainings, he has these habits already, and so it's going to be easier to teach someone who has no habits our
Right.
habits, rather than breaking these habits and then breaking this person completely down and then retraining him. And so that's part of the issue of why they're more interested in athletes, because athletes can kind of they understand the training, right? They understand, like, waking up, they understand diet, they understand all these things that it takes to become an athlete. And wrestlers, honestly, a lot of them are lazy. They don't understand this thing. They kind of just go in there, perform, they eat whatever they want to eat. Their training regimens aren't, precise, and they're just, honestly, for a lack of a better term, they're sloppy. And so with athletes, it's easier to craft someone that understands that hard work, determination, dieting, all these things are what they're already accustomed to. It's easy to take that person and just give him wrestling, rather than this person who wrestles that really doesn't have that type of background of, training hard and regiment and dieting. And so that would be
Right.
my theory on it, if I was to understand, like, if I used my thought process behind it and why I would do it that way, that would be the answer I would have.
Before we get out of here, I just have a couple more questions. You talked about training in lucha libre and in strong style. Do you mind getting into those a little bit before we get out of here?
Nah,
I'm
man.
more interested in hearing that stuff.
Yeah, man. So strong style, more cemento. Japanese style was with Jason Knight. That was his thing. It was more, the hard hitting, and it really wasn't
Right.
the fake stuff. And so we kind of, that was kind of what we kind of had. We had, like, the more hard hitting style of
Right.
wrestling. hard training. We would be in there training, squat, bumping, that was going to be the aspects of our training. And then after all that stuff was done, yeah, you're going to be lucky if you get 20 minutes of like ring time, in the beginning, and then towards the end, like I said, it kind of shifted, but that was when I first started. That is kind of like this. And going back to that training, the more students he had, the more excited he was about his training. And then, if you know anything about wrestling schools, sometimes you have 20 students in there, and then all of a sudden you have 3. And you're, you know what I mean? You have to be as excited when you're training 3 people as you are 20. And so that kind of was determination there. But that was a fun style. It taught me how to be stiff. It taught me how to be hard. It taught me how to take big hits and not really be fazed by them. And then Lucha Libre, this guy, Super Zeta, he passed away a few years ago, but he came in from Mexico, and he heard a lot of stories about me through the independent scene. Like, I was a real jerk, really hard to work with, very stiff. Nobody wants to get in the ring with him. He'll go out and hurt you. Like, that was the stigma that I had. And he was like, I want to meet him. And so he gets there, and he has like this chip on his shoulder when he meets me. And I'm like, hey, nice to meet you, blah, 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 blah. And so we start training, and he's like trying to work me Lucha Libre. And like, he's working me in circles because I'm not really familiar in Lucha Libre. And then we go training, and then he's like, man, he goes, all the things that I heard about you, he goes, are absolutely not true. He goes, you're very respectful. He goes, I'd love to take you to Mexico and train in Lucha Libre. He goes, dude, you'd be really good. He goes, you have a good mind for the business. He goes, you're very respectful. He goes, man, I can't believe I even entertained half the stuff that I heard about you. And so, he's the one who kind of brought me to Mexico, and I trained under the Mohicanos there, and Super Skida, and I kind of learned through there Lucha Libre style, and that's where I learned my Lucha Libre. And basically the first time I went to tour was 6 months after I became Josef von Schmidt, and what John Cena Sr. had said, six months on the nose, I was in Mexico training for Lucha Libre and on tour.
So it worked. What he told you, basically, 6 months on the nose, like you said. That's pretty incredible. So you enjoyed the tour of Mexico and the learning the Lucha Libre. You had to, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite things. It's also one of the places where I got the worst injury. I was training with a guy named Piel Roja, and he's one of the Mohegans. And we were training, and he did like the butt bomb right from the top rope, like what Rey Mysterio used to do. But he just miscalculated a little bit, and he landed on my liver, and he split my liver. And it was probably one of the most painful injuries I've ever had in wrestling. And like, I could barely walk, but I had psychosis, and I had Blue Demon Jr. wrestling in Mexico, right? And my buddy was like, man, he goes, you're hurt, man. He goes, we got to get you back to the US. I was like, dude, if I become incoherent, you drag me to the embassy. I was like, do not bring me to any of your hospitals. You drag me to the embassy, and you leave me on the front lawn. And I was like, but I'm not leaving Mexico until I have these matches. I never know when you're going to have those matches again, but that was the tenacity that I had for wrestling. I was like, I'm doing it. I don't care. And I wrestled the Los Vipers with Psychosis and Blue Demon Jr. And I made the matches work. Like, I wasn't at my best, but I was like, there's no way I'm not taking these matches.
How much time did you take off after that injury?
For that injury, after I got back from Mexico, I took maybe about 3 or 4 months.
Okay. And then you were fine to go?
No. But like that, when you're a pro, you can't.
That's pro wrestling. Yeah. Yeah.
I can make whatever excuse I want. Like, I took some time off, like this last couple, like maybe about 5 years. I started a family. I have 2 daughters. a 5 and a 3-year-old, and so that's the majority of reason why I took time off from wrestling. Like I kind of started fading away from it because I wanted to start a family. And then now I have a family, and now like we're kind of established again. And so I'm going to get back into it. I'm going to go ahead and one more run it, I'll say. And I'm going to go ahead and put a couple more matches down here. And Steam's starting to pick up. And like as soon as I throw my name out there, you know, I got a lot of people start contacting me to come work. It's just also on my shoot job, I'm a stockbroker. So I can't really take all these bookings and miss out on my regular job. So that's right. It's all in it now.
Right. Do you want to throw those dates out there? Do you have dates confirmed?
I do. Unfortunately, I'm on my phone, but if you check me out on Facebook, you can check me out at Josef Schmidt on my page. I'm going to have my dates up there. A lot of it is for like what I'm working with now is a Christian ministry, and they do like some work that goes behind in jails, and we kind of bring a mission of Jesus to these kids who don't really have hope, and I'm really enjoying that, and that's going to be the main thing that I'm working with now. But I'm also have some contacts with some friends that I had back in the past, and you know, they want me to get ready for some opportunities that are coming up here in the fall. Don't want to talk too much about that because, you know, like pro wrestling, things come through and then things, you know, fall through. Yeah. So.
Right. Well, if you make your way up to Connecticut, you got to let me know. So I'll make sure to be out there. I mean,
yeah, man. You know. The plan is to come up there one time. Sure. And I'm trying to just put another PWA show together, and I might do one here in Georgia and one there in Connecticut. I've already started talking to a few people, and you know, some of my former students to try to put this whole thing together.
Okay, great. Do you want to put out there where people can find you on the social?
I don't know if you can hear it. Josef Schmidt Facebook page. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter. Same thing, Josef Schmidt, JosefVon Schmidt. And yeah, you go ahead and follow me there. Like again, I said, I'm mostly down in Georgia and Florida right now doing stuff. And then the plan is to just kind of ease myself back in and get just one last tour before I hang up the boots for good.
I want to thank you very much for coming on today and doing this, and hopefully maybe we can do this again down the road.
Yeah, man, I love it. I really appreciate it, man. This is it was fun talking with you, and it was interesting, this kind of reliving some memories. Like I haven't talked about ACW in a long time. Tim Kilgore, like it is hilarious that I'm up and like I actually was thinking about Tim Kilgore maybe like 3 or 4 days ago. I'm like, you know, Tim Kilgore, like he got some opportunities and he really wasn't even a character, you know. But just
I always the thing is when I do the research, I always come up and then it's always if something's like a personal memory that I'm gonna go with that as opposed to like the obvious question that everybody else wants to hear. I want to know personally for me, you know what I mean? Like whatever happened to this guy or you know stuff like that. So, and I just remember that guy personally quite a bit. So, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, man, let's do it again.